Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we've got another video for you Kriegaboo fanboys. In this video, we are going to be comparing the anti-aircraft battery of Bismarck to Battleship New Jersey. Not at all a fair comparison, but we recently released a video comparing Bismarck's main battery guns to New Jersey's. And the results were surprisingly similar. I've always thought bigger gun, slightly later war development. The 16-inch 50 caliber is generally a pretty well thought of gun, arguably the best battleship gun of all times. Surely Bismarck's can't compare. And you guys know that I'm always hard on the Kriegsmarine in particular. But surprisingly, Bismarck's guns were very, very close in just about every category to the capabilities of an Iowa-class battleship. So today we're going to do the same thing and look at the anti-aircraft guns. These numbers are not going to be close, and it is not a fair comparison. But there's something to be said for that. Why is that the case? What are the doctrinal reasons for that? What are the equipment that is leading to that? And we're going to go through and compare the standard German guns as they appear on Bismarck to New Jersey. Specifically, we're going to be looking at New Jersey's ultimate World War II configuration that she would have had in 1945 after her last dry docking of the war. And we're going to be looking at Bismarck's during her one and only voyage. Realistically, it would be more reasonable to compare Tirpitz's 1943 configuration with New Jersey's as-built 1943 configuration. And don't worry, we are going to do that later. But today I've got this excellent model of Bismarck to talk about. So we're specifically going to look at this configuration. And I may or may not have the Tirpitz equivalent of this on my workbench to talk about that in a future video. Make sure you've liked, shared, and subscribed to the channel so that you're around in a couple of weeks when I finish building that one. So, first off, today's video is sponsored by COBI USA. They sent me this kit to build and review. I had actually built one of their older model Bismarcks several years ago. It was actually my first COBI kit ever. That would have been, wow, that's probably 2018 or 2019 before the pandemic even hit. So the problem is these sorts of kits are only in production for a limited period of time. They make them, and when they sell out, they've got no more. So every couple of years, they release a new one. And this is probably the third version of Bismarck that they have released, because people like you keep saying, hey, I want a Bismarck, you're sold out, where can I get a new one? Well, all right, we'll release a new one. It's updated. So this is kit number 4840, and this is specifically the Executive Edition one, which has a little bit more features, a little bit more pieces than a regular edition one, but there is another kit of that is out for sale right now. These kits just released. In particular, I want you to look at that piece count down there. This New Jersey kit that I built a couple of months ago has about 2,500 pieces. The Bismarck kit has just under 3,000. So significantly more pieces. And most of these COBI battleship kits come with 2 rule books. Look at this. We got 3 rule books. We've got over 500 steps to put this thing together. So there's a link in the description below to buildcobi.com, which is the American distributor of these kits. COBI is a Polish company. And there is a discount code if you see this Bismarck kit and you're like, I like it, or the non-executive edition one. So both editions of Bismarck that are out right now, if you buy them from buildcobi.com and use the discount code we've got in the description below, you'll get 15% off these kits. I will never pay more than 10 cents per piece on a kit. So remember that these are 2,900 piece kits, and look at the price when you've got that 15% off, and tell me what you think about that. Make sure that you get yours soon. The code is only good for 30 days after the video is released. We're releasing this in April of 2023, so by mid-May 2023, by the 82nd anniversary of Bismarck sinking, the code will no longer be good anymore. So, in addition to the kit, with the Executive Edition at least, you get a Kriegsmarine captain. So I guess this guy is representing Ernst Lindemann, who was captain of the Bismarck during her maiden voyage. And you get just about everything here. I've only made a couple of modifications. I just finished building this kit last night. But be sure to check the rest of their website, in addition to battleships like New Jersey and Bismarck. And you can also get the cruiser Prince Eugen that sails with Bismarck, or the British battleship Hood that fights Bismarck, if you want to get the complete set there. You can also check out, they've got all sorts of aircraft, tanks, and other vehicles on their site. I consider myself to be a COBI master builder because Bismarck is my 7th COBI battleship that I've built. So, I use the ACE terminology. You're an ace if you've shot down 5 planes. If you've built 5 COBI battleships, then you can call yourself a COBI master builder. So, Bismarck is my 7th. Tirpitz will probably be my 8th sometime in the next month. So, how does the anti-aircraft battery of this ship stack up to this one? We're specifically looking, like I said earlier, May 1941, so the threat of aircraft is significantly lower. Aircraft have not yet sunk a battleship underway. And German anti-aircraft technology just isn't as good as the American AA technology, even at the same time period. So this is not going to be a fair comparison, but it is really, really interesting looking at the difference. So, what do we have? First off, Bismarck-class battleships are, of course, armed with their famous 15-inch guns. Remember, video link in the description below of us comparing these 15-inch guns to New Jersey's. There are 8 of these in 4 twin turrets, named Anton, Bruno, Caesar, and Dora. So much cooler than turret 1, turret 2, turret 3. Next up, you've got 12 5.9-inch guns, or 150 millimeter. That's those guns here. They're all in twin mounts. And really, these first 2 types of guns are single-purpose anti-surface guns. But both get put into an anti-aircraft role on both Bismarck and Tirpitz. So we'll look at those. Next up, you've got 16 4.1-inch guns, or 105 millimeter. And these are the primary anti-aircraft battery of Bismarck-class battleships. They come in 8 twin mounts, and they are really interesting, especially as relates to Bismarck. Next up, you've got 16 37 millimeter guns. These are probably the worst guns on Bismarck. They are a twin mounting, so there are 8 twin mountings around the superstructure. But we'll talk more about why they're so bad later. And finally, you've got 20 20-millimeter guns for close-in defense. These come primarily as single mounts. There are only 12 of those. And there are 2 quadruple mounts, which are relatively late additions to Bismarck and will be much more prevalent on later Kriegsmarine ships. And had Bismarck survived, you would have seen a lot of these single mount guns replaced with quad mounts and even more added. Tirpitz ended up with over 70 20-millimeter batteries by the end of her career, compared to just 20 on Bismarck. So there is room on this class of ship for more of these weapons types. The quad mount is very good. The single mounts are at least comparable to the Oerlikon. We'll get to that more in a second. And then Bismarck actually has a pair of Army mount 20-millimeter guns that were lifted from somewhere to supplement the ship's anti-aircraft battery. So the crew has decided that, you know, this is a threat. We've got room for it. And they're not wrong. They end up being disabled by British aircraft because they couldn't shoot any down. And they definitely have the room for it because we've just seen that Tirpitz gets a ton more added. So they get whatever mounts they can find. So now, let's look at these actually close-up weapon system to weapon system. First off, the main battery guns. Both Bismarck-class battleships and Iowa-class battleships could use their main battery guns in an anti-aircraft role. We have no evidence that New Jersey or the other Iowa-class battleships ever did, but we do have range tables for using them in that capability. Both Bismarck and Tirpitz used their guns in anti-aircraft role. Tirpitz had special 15-inch anti-aircraft shells by the end of her career. Neither Bismarck nor New Jersey ever had special anti-aircraft shells, so they were using their regular main battery shells. For the purpose of today's video, I am not going to compare these guns. We've compared them as anti-surface weapons. Really, while you could fire them as anti-aircraft weapons and they might make the crew feel better, they were pretty valueless. New Jersey's anti-aircraft range tables imply that you're firing them as barrage rounds. So you're using the high explosive rounds, you're using the time delay fuse to make them explode when they're in midair, to create a flak cloud for enemy aircraft to fly through. And that's what Tirpitz's special anti-aircraft 15-inch shells were used for. Bismarck didn't use her guns for that. Being attacked by torpedo planes, they would aim the 15-inch guns in front of the attacking torpedo planes and try and hit the water just in front of them, creating a water cloud that would explode up and either take out the aircraft or force it to veer off and into an unfavorable fire control position. So while they are used as anti-aircraft guns, I'm not going to consider them for the purposes here. Next up, the 5.9-inch guns. German battleships were expecting to fight close-in surface engagements in the North Sea where they were likely going to be outnumbered. So they have a heavier secondary battery than most other European battleships at this time. They're expecting to have to drive off enemy cruisers and destroyers and might need the extra firepower in stopping enemy capital ships. So they intentionally stick with single-purpose guns in the anti-surface role or the anti-air role. However, because you have the guns, they end up being used in both roles. The 5.9-inch gun, as far as I'm aware, did not have a dedicated anti-aircraft shell when Bismarck sailed. By the end of Tirpitz's career, it of course did, but in May of 1941, it was not intended to be used as an anti-aircraft gun. I'm not sure how well the directors were at aiming it as an anti-aircraft gun, and I'm not quite sure. I assume it was used in barrage fire with a time-delayed fuse, but it is possible that these were issued without time-delay fuses and they were relying on actually hitting the target to set off the fuse, which is nearly impossible with a gun with this kind of rate of fire. So, the projectile weighs 100 pounds. It's interesting because the 6-inch gun, just a little bit bigger than the 5-inch gun on New Jersey, the projectile is almost twice as heavy. The powder casing is about 52 pounds, which is going to include a 31-pound powder charge. So the projectile is 100 pounds, which is nearly twice as much as the 5-inch projectile from the American ships. This is a significantly more effective anti-surface weapon. It uses a 31-pound powder charge in a casing that ends up being 52 pounds, has a range of about 25,000 yards, which is about 12 and a half nautical miles. So pretty good range. Rate of fire of 8 rounds per minute, which is relatively low, which is why this gun isn't great as an anti-aircraft round. Now, just a little bit of the methodology here. There are all sorts of rate of fires quoted for this gun, and many of the other guns we'll talk about. I went with the rate of fire that is the highest practical rate of fire. So for example, the Bofors 40mm gun can fire 120 rounds per barrel easy. It can fire 160 rounds per barrel at certain elevations. But realistically, when you're having to wait for the ammunition to be passed up and dropped in 4-round clips, the rate of fire that's achievable in combat is about 80 to 90 rounds per minute per barrel. So I'm quoting the high end of what is considered achievable in actual combat, not the pie in the sky highest achievable if you're at the loading angle and blah, blah, blah. So that's what my numbers are for this. And we're specifically going to look at, because there are all sorts of different gun sizes. We got 6-inch, 5-inch, 4-inch, 40 millimeter, 37 millimeter, 20 millimeter. We're going to specifically look at the rate of fire times the weight of projectile times the number of barrels on a single broadside. So that's pretty much half of the battery of one of these ships. I did the math as half of the battery. There are a couple of guns, say New Jersey has these centerline guns, so really her broadside weight is a little bit better than half. But New Jersey doesn't need the help with her numbers, as you'll see. So our first number here, you can fire 4,800 pounds of projectile from the broadside battery of these 5.9-inch guns every single minute. So that's actually pretty middle of the road. Those projectiles are ridiculously heavy, which again makes them good in surface combat, but terrible in anti-aircraft because it's so hard to load. In fact, these guns would have to return to about a 3-degree loading angle, and then they take their time to train and elevate to fire at the target again. True dedicated anti-aircraft guns try to track the target as you're reloading to save time. So these guns, pretty bad, but I added their weight here anyway because honestly Bismarck needs the padding. Next up in the size, you got the American 5-inch gun. Fires a 55-pound projectile. It's a 22-pound powder casing. I don't count the weight of the powder casings for the big guns, the semi-fixed ones, but I do, just for simplicity's sake, with the fixed cartridges, like a 20 millimeter round. I'm not going to math out the weight of the bullet versus the weight of the propellant. So just some more of the methodologies there. Has a rate of fire of about 15 rounds per minute. I'm sure you've heard it quoted as high as 22 rounds per minute. Again, we're just going with the maximum likely attainable in combat. So about 15 rounds per minute. And that gives us a weight of 8,250 pounds per minute that New Jersey's battery can fire. Again, she's got 10 rounds in a battery, 5 twin mounts, and this is just 6 mounts. They are firing a heavier projectile, but New Jersey's rate of fire is almost 3 times that of Bismarck's with the secondary battery. Realistically, American battleships don't have anything comparable to this, and the 5-inch gun is more comparable to the 4.1-inch guns on the German ships that are forming the anti-aircraft battery. So let's look at those next. The projectile is 33 pounds. The total casing, the projectile powder and casing, is about 60 pounds for one of those. Has a maximum range of about 1,900 yards, or just under 10 miles, compared to about 1,700 yards for the 5-inch gun, or excuse me, 17,000 yards, 19,000, 17,000. So depending on the angle, the 4.1-inch gun actually can get better range than the American 5-inch gun. The rate of fire is about 18 rounds per minute per barrel, practically, so just a little bit higher than the American 5-inch. And the weight of the projectiles that they can put out in a 1-minute time period from a single broadside is about 4,752 pounds, which ends up being roughly half of what the American battery can do because the projectile is smaller. But that does help with the higher rate of fire. So these are the best German anti-aircraft gun. They've got the stopping power to put down enemy aircraft. They've got their own dedicated directors. Bismarck has 4 of them, much like an Iowa-class battleship has 4 of them. They're going to be your primary anti-aircraft defense. The problem is, Bismarck has 2 different types of these. The forward 2 are the modern type, and they are triaxial, i.e. they can maneuver the gun on 3 separate axes. So you've got elevation, that's pretty normal. You got rotation, that's pretty normal. But they can also angle the gun side to side, which, I don't know, is that pitch or yaw? So the idea is their battleships are designed to fight in the North Sea. Pretty heavy weather. In fact, during Bismarck's one deployment, she does encounter pretty heavy weather throughout most of the time that she's at sea. And that was by design. It helps her hide better in a pre-radar being prevalent time period. These guns can slew side to side so they can account for the ship pitching and rolling. And now's a good time to point out that on paper at least, Bismarck is a better gunnery platform than an Iowa-class battleship. She's going to be the more stable platform. She is just a little bit shorter and a little bit wider, so that she also sits a little bit lower. So she is, in theory, going to roll less in similar sea conditions compared to an Iowa-class battleship. But her guns are able to do this, which means that the directors have to be able to do that. The problem is, when Bismarck was completed, only 4 of those guns were available. So Bismarck is actually commissioned with only half of this tertiary anti-aircraft battery. And it's not until almost a year after she's been commissioned that the Germans finally decide, hey, we've got an older model of this gun around that's only biaxial. It can only do the normal rotate and elevate. So she ends up with 2 separate models of 4.1-inch guns, which means that she has 2 separate models of directors. So for the forward guns, there's a director on each side of the superstructure here that are aiming them. For the aft guns, there are 2 centerline directors. And these are not, again, these are not triaxially stabilized because their guns are not. So this severely complicates the fire control problem for Bismarck during her anti-aircraft engagements. Now, Tirpitz is completed later, and she, as far as I know, gets all of the same type of modern, newest, latest, and greatest guns. Bismarck would have gotten her whole battery completed with the normal type of guns had she survived her maiden combat voyage. Because she does not, well, she does not, partially because she has these 2 different batteries. Instead of being able to barrage fire from a single director controlling the whole battery at a flight of aircraft, they need to break the battery down into at least 2 groups. The forward group that can slew around a lot more, and the after group that's older. I feel like this has more to do with Bismarck's ruining than the fact that the guns may or may not have been able to engage aircraft going as slow as the British Swordfish. They're not able to put up a cohesive wall of flak because they're going from 2 separate directors. The battery is half and half. And so they're not able to shoot down a single Swordfish even after multiple attacks over the course of the week that she's underway. And these Swordfish managed to land a couple of torpedo hits, one managing to critically disable her by hitting in her rudders and leaving her in a position that she can be destroyed by British battleships. So this anti-aircraft failure is a critical failure. The Iowa-class battleships have similar fire control. You got 2 on the center line, just like Bismarck, 1 on each side, just like Bismarck, so you can fire, you can point 3 forward or 3 aft or 3 on the broadside. With Bismarck's, you can do 4 aft, 3 to each side, or 2 forward. So a little bit different based on where they've got extra centerline space. But critically, New Jersey's fire control and secondary batteries are all the same. So she is able to put up cohesive barrages. And in fact, by the time New Jersey gets to the front, they're not trying to do cohesive barrages. They have the VT fuse, which means you can really engage single aircraft with single guns and expect reasonable results from that. Again, New Jersey is 3 or 4 years newer in this configuration I'm showing compared to Bismarck here. So now that we've looked at the long-range anti-aircraft defense, let's look at the medium-range anti-aircraft defense. And this is where the single highest discrepancy between the 2 ships comes around. Bismarck has 16 37mm guns. New Jersey has 80 40mm guns. In theory, the projectiles that these two guns are firing are similar, but Bismarck really needs more medium guns. She doesn't have them because Germany didn't really have a good medium caliber gun. The 37 millimeter is god-awful. It is manually loaded 1 round at a time, which means that you get a rate of fire of 30 rounds per minute, compared to 3 times that for a 40 millimeter gun. When you add to that the fact that there are 80 40 millimeter barrels on New Jersey and only 16 on Bismarck, Bismarck only has 48 barrels in her whole anti-aircraft battery. So New Jersey has almost twice as much with just her 40 millimeters. Get this, New Jersey can fire more ammunition from her 40 millimeter guns in a single minute than Bismarck can fire from all of her anti-aircraft guns over the same time period. So that medium defense is really where the American battleship stands out compared to her German counterpart. I mean, the 3.7-inch projectile is about 4.5 pounds. The Bofors is about 4.7 pounds, so relatively similar. It just comes down to the number of barrels and the fact that an Iowa can fire 3 times as many times per barrel as the German manually loaded guns. The 37 millimeter battery can fire 1,080 pounds of ammunition in a minute. The American Bofors can fire 17,280 rounds in a single minute. So again, that is more than the entire 1,292 pounds that Bismarck can fire. Like 6,000 more pounds just from the 40 millimeter guns. So that shows you the massive anti-aircraft discrepancy between these two ships. The final weapon system here is the 20 millimeter gun. German ships use a mix of 20 millimeter guns manufactured indigenously and 20 millimeter Oerlikons, very similar to the type that Iowa-class battleships had and other American ships. The Oerlikon was pretty widely used during the war and very highly regarded. And then again, remember, Bismarck does also have these 2 Army mount guns that are slightly different from the other standard guns. The German shell weighs about 0.3 pounds, the American about 0.5. Both have a range of roughly 2.5 miles, although the German 20 millimeter has a greater range than the Oerlikon. The Oerlikon gets a rate of fire of about 320 rounds per minute versus just 220 for the German gun. The German guns come in 40-round magazines versus 60-round magazines for the American Oerlikons, which means they need to be reloaded less frequently, which means they can maintain a higher rate of fire per minute. The German ship can fire 660 pounds per minute from their 20 millimeter battery compared to 4,640 from the American ship. Again, at her max in 1945, New Jersey has 57 of these 20 millimeter guns to just 20 on the German ship. And Tirpitz will actually end up with more 20 millimeters than New Jersey. While New Jersey has 8 twin mounts and the rest single mounts in this configuration, Bismarck has 12 single mounts, and these 2 positions up here are the new quad mount that Germany starts to roll out at this time. And because you're putting 4 barrels on the same target, that is way more potential to chew up an aircraft than the American ship has, where you're trying to put a whole battery on the same target. But because these are all individually aimed, it's not necessarily concentrating the fire like that quad barrel, and you need significantly more crew manning it than a single mount with quad barrels. So I would say that the German quads are the best individual 20 millimeter guns here on the table, but there's only 2 of them on Bismarck, 1 on each broadside. So at the end of the day, who's got more anti-aircraft firepower? Should be obvious, but let's put the numbers to it. Bismarck is 1,192 pounds per minute. New Jersey is almost 3 times more, 30,170 pounds per minute. And again, that's primarily the 40 millimeter guns at 17,280 pounds per minute alone from those guns, more than Bismarck's entire anti-aircraft battery. So that really goes to show you how anti-aircraft armament improves over time, how Allied anti-aircraft configurations were better than German ones. But just a reminder, in the future, we may do a video on comparing Tirpitz's to New Jersey, because they are significantly closer in time period. Oh no, I forgot to show you guys the coolest feature of this model. The executive edition of Bismarck allows you to see the engine rooms. So here you can see the 2 engine rooms with their 3 engines powering Bismarck. My New Jersey kit, you can't see the engine room, but you can see the shell handling arrangements. Remember, you get a 15% discount on the Bismarck kits, whether you get this executive edition or the other regular edition, if you buy one from buildcobi.com in the next 30 days. Also, remember to check their website for their other battleships, such as their New Jersey kit, and their other various kits, including aircraft and tanks. So, which of these various anti-aircraft guns do you think is the best of the lot? Let us know in the comments section down below. Do you think the Germans had some of their guns better? They just weren't in high enough numbers or homogeneous enough? Let me know down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. In particular, we'd like to thank BuildCobi.com for sponsoring today's video and sending us this model of Bismarck. Remember, the discount code is linked in the description below. You can support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about our museum and the channel. Thanks for watching.